Hello, and welcome to the Psychology of Personality. I believe we're in week 9 now, and we are going to be looking at Chapter 11, Biology and Personality, and taking a little walk down some of the philosophical roots here of the early field of philosophy and psychology. If we look in the course book, I immediately jump into the whole notion of mind-body. Now, Rene Descartes is credited with introducing to Western philosophy the idea of mind and body dualism, meaning that the mind is conceptually separate from the body. Now, we know that modern science has brought us to a new place, but we have to give this some credence. That we often, as Rene probably experienced, we often sort of have out-of-body experiences. When we refer to our body, we refer to it almost as a possession. Like there's me and my body. There's me, which is my personality and my thought processes and my ways of being, and then there's this body that I'm in, that I happen to be occupying at this time. Maybe I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. So that kind of idea. And this body is sort of like it's the vessel that is carrying my personality around. Now that dualism has really shaped the thinking and history of psychology and largely the history of Western thought in itself, this separation of mind and body. And maybe one of those East-West comparisons is that in the East, in Eastern thought, those are not necessarily so divided. And I think the Western world in its current explorations of mind-body work and mind-body connection are realizing that there's a stronger interrelationship between the brain, the mind, our thinking, our personality, and our bodies. Notwithstanding that there are actually biological structures in our brains that we associate with personality. So here we are in the course book, and we're looking at the DNA that are in us and the behavioral genetics, and that we can recognize that certain behavioral traits can be associated with collections of DNA that we have that sort of predispose us to have certain kinds of personality traits. There's structures with the brain, such as the amygdala, which has a lot to do with emotional sensation and emotional reaction, maybe emotional intelligence, those kinds of things, and where it's located in the brain here. And it's sort of the brakes on emotional expression. This sort of, if you kind of look at it, let's look back at that image again, and we see where it's located. It's sort of this band. It's these two structures that go, they're equal structures that go around inside of the midbrain, and sort of the connection from the early mammalian brain to the higher ordered cortex of the advanced human brain. And we see that potentially this is the part of the brain that makes us human. And animals, let's say for example, I have cats, and cats are, they can be divine, but they can also be cats. And they can be your friend one day, and then they're hissing at you and scratching you the next, right? That kind of thing. And and we're thinking like, hey, I feed you, and you're trying to scratch me, and that's, why are you trying to scratch? So it feeds you. And you and I, because we have an amygdala, have that ability to say, I probably shouldn't, bite the hand that feeds me, right? I probably got to have some logic there. And that's what kind of separates us from the animal kingdom, is the amygdala, which I phrased in there as the biological superego. Let's just bring up Freud again because it's fun. And we have the superego, which is the aspect of our personality experience from Freud's perspective that picks up on the norms, values, and expectations of our society and the do's and don'ts. The cognitive realization that there's some other factors we probably should take into consideration before we act on our pure instincts or pure id. And so that's sort of the amygdala's role. So we see, and that ability to understand and shape our emotions and react accordingly and understand the world and whatever, that's a huge part of who we are and how we exist in the world. In fact, when we talk about somebody having a great personality or whatever, it's usually expressed in ways the individual has a good way of negotiating with people, of understanding where people are coming from, being able to give comforting words when they're needed, being able to stand back when they're not wanted. You know, those kind of ability to manage the world of emotions and be able to communicate within the mores and expectations of our society. Not sure. You know, those are huge parts of personality, and they're all centered here in the amygdala. So a really good biological center for that. Now I go into a little bit of evolutionary psychology to put that lens on this, looking at where some of these things may have come from. It's there is a universal human nature, and it's based on evolutionary psychology. That the adaptation of the ability to recognize other people's emotions and react accordingly and work cooperatively established, if we want to look at natural selection, the individuals who were able to do that established themselves better. They had more likelihood of procreation, and that genetic trait passed on from generation to generation made them more adaptable to their environment. So these things are very, very important. Now I take a little detour here to talk about some weird science, and and that is the story of Wilhelm Reich. The museum of which is located right here in Maine, and I've never been there. I would really like to have a field trip there. Of course, now is not the time to do that. But Wilhelm Reich did some very interesting but off-the-cuff work. Not really considered true science, but interesting. I threw it in there because he was one of the people that said, this mind-brain thing, we probably need to bring that together. And maybe he was revolutionary in that way. He thought that was, let's return to the fact that we are a single being with a mind and body connected, influencing them. So, where he went from there, that's for the historians to tell, and maybe a neat field trip one of these days. But certainly ushering the age of a sense that maybe these are much more connected than we thought. And I think we understand this much better today than we did even when I began my education in psychology, of looking at the importance of, let's say, mindfulness, being in the moment, attitudes, and opinions and value systems, and even the ability to control our behaviors that to benefit ourselves, the decisions that we make and whatnot, how important those are for our physical health. And then conversely, when our body's not doing well, how that affects our thinking. And to be able to say that there is a very, very deep connection there. And I think some of the mindfulness initiatives that we're seeing of people being much more aware of their bodies, but how they're feeling, much more in tune with being a caretaker of this vessel, not just riding in it, that you are aware of the body's needs, that you satisfy those needs, that you take care of it, you clean it, you feed it, you bring it to the doctor when it needs to go, and it's yours. It's your possession. It's still making that separation, but understanding that by having and taking care of that body, it's a very good way to also take care of your mind. Now, so in the course book, I go into mindfulness of the body, being aware of your body, mindfulness of feelings, getting into what those feelings are, and how they represent themselves in bodily sensations. What does anger feel like? What's going on in my body that's happening? What does sadness feel like? And that kind of mindfulness about that. We have mindfulness of the mind, the kind of a metacognitive perspective, what am I thinking, analyzing those kinds of things. And then mindfulness of mental objects, these distractions and ideas and notions that are in our mind, and thinking about those. And maybe they've been steering us wrong. Maybe, let's say the concept of self-worth or the self-esteem, maybe that's been a barrier for you, and you've seen that, and to be mindful of this construct that exists within your mind that has almost become automated, changes the way that you think about yourself, changes the way you perceive success and failure. Success is by luck, failure is expected, those kind of things. But these are constructs in your mind that if you can get your mind around them, maybe they're manageable. And thinking about this, a little bit of therapy in there too. So other ways in which we become mindful, getting the zone that we can get into when we're playing sports, when we're really, really concentrating. There's lots of actual great psychology on that. Taking walks in natural settings, exposing ourselves to the natural sounds, feelings, and smells, and getting mindful about that too. Instead of like planning your day, just being a little zen about it, a little in the moment, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling the bark on the trees, feeling the coldness or the chill of the air at this time of year, the colors, the way the light, just being very into the moment can be a very refreshing experience. Playing with children, and when I mean that, I mean getting into the mindset of playing with children. I'll never forget when I took, this is in, and it's true, I'll never forget, because this was in 1983. I took a class called Child Development. And this is in the first semester of my, actually it must have been 84. 1984, second semester, because I had to take intro first. Child Development. Anyway, Guy Lefrancois wrote the textbook. I even remember his name. And he wrote this book about child behavior, and he wrote the book on play. And I'll never forget that in the intro, he always told these stories from his clinical practice or whatever. But he told the story that him and his colleague, who were, the writing, like I kind of write the course book, I talk about the experience of writing the course book right in it and what's going on in my mind that day. And said him and his colleague that were writing the chapter on play, they're like, who are we to talk about play? I mean, when's the last time you've ever played, for real, talking about children's play? So they took the opportunity. Here they are on this nice big campus. That's how the story goes. They go to the store, they buy little Matchbox cars, and they bought, some trucks, and they bought some little politically inappropriate now, like cowboy and Indians sort of things. And they engaged in an afternoon of pure uninhibited play as best as they could. And they found themselves slowly entering into the world of the child. That they were racing, they were playing tag, they're doing, of course, everybody, the people on campus all thought they were nuts, and they're just, what's going on? And they just ignored that all and tried to get into that world. And not only, they came back and they reflect in the textbook how quickly that chapter came together after they had done that, but how profound that experience was of actually getting into the play. And I'll admit, I, as an adult, I experienced that as a musician, and that's why we call it playing. And I'm very cognizant of the role that music plays and playing in a band plays in my life. And I work with a band that is very committed to the idea that this does, as successful as that we might be, we want to make sure it never becomes the job, and it translates from playing into working, and how important that is. Now, I experienced that, and that is incredible. I also have a granddaughter, and as of since her arrival, I've been making a concerted effort when she's here to at least try to get into those play moments with her when I really try to imagine those characters that we're playing with, and and getting into that. There's a performance quality to it, the making her laugh and doing all those things. But there's also, I'm trying to really get into that moment the way Miss Dr. LaFrancois did. And I tell you, pretty amazing. So playing music, listening to music, writing, and just, journaling, doing that, prayer and meditation, painting, listening to Bob Ross, they got that. That's a... actually, I have a little note in there about the app tutorials and stuff, and that I took that out of the course books. But look it up. There's a Bob Ross app and Bob Ross videos available, and people are using those as meditative practices. His tone of voice and how he would talk. He's an amazing human being. Okay, so we enter into the, after all that, we enter into the assessments. And first I ask you to talk about temperament, what you were like as a kid. What does that relate to where you are now? Looking at that part of the chapter. But then in chapter 11, assignment, I want you to give meditation or mindfulness a go. I want you to see if you can get this app or a similar app. I'm okay with that, if you already have a mindfulness app. But here's Smiling Mind. It's available for iOS and Android. It's free. And you go through the registration process, and then it gives you a bunch of options for a meditation practice. Managing stress, mindfulness at work, mindfulness in sports, mindful eating, improving your performance, et cetera, et cetera. And I want you to do that for a couple weeks. And then write a paper about it. And give it a really, really good shot. Give it a, who knows, this might be transformative. Maybe you're already in a meditative practice. This could enhance it. Or I'm totally cool with you talking about your current practice, and maybe being a little bit more mindful about that current practice, so that you can reflect that in the assignment here. So your assignment on the course will have a title page. You set your goals. You can read the rubric here. You reflect on the barriers that you experienced in achieving those goals, and then finally your results after a couple weeks of doing this. And what was the overall benefit? Was it more struggle than it was worth? Is it something that you might want to continue? Maybe you need to continue a different program, or maybe something else would be better for you. But just kind of getting into this meditative practice. Now, if you want to do something, I'm going to take a walk every day in the woods. I'm okay with this being a flexible assignment. Not necessarily, doing an app that has you sitting down and meditating per se, but finding your way that you feel would be most comfortable for you to get into mindfulness. The point of which is to experience a connection between your mind and body and counter that Western notion of separation, because being in contact with your body and its presence and its sensations and whatnot, even for moments that we call meditation or deep thinking or mindfulness, are restorative. In fact, they help us feel better. They make us healthier. They make us connected, and these can be very important parts of our daily routine as we contend with the challenges of today, of multiple crises going on right now, with economic crises, with COVID, an election cycle. I mean, all of these things, schoolwork, work, kids at home now because they can't go to school. I mean, it's a time for mindfulness. It's a time to self-care, to take that time out of your busy schedule and do this. As I did see a poster one time, I thought this was very profound. It says, if you can't take time right now to take care of yourself when you're well, how will you find time to take care of yourself when you're sick? I like that. So as busy as we are, it's a lot better to take care of yourself when you're well than to take care of yourself when you're sick. So I will see you in the discussions, and good luck with that. If there's any questions, As always, post them in the discussion board or send me a message, and I will see you later.